welcome to SiouxOnline.com. We're at the campaign office of David Orazietti, MPP for Sault Ste. Marie, and we're going to ask him a few questions about the upcoming election. Now, how do you feel going into this election? How confident are you?
Well, no one should ever be overconfident in an election. I'm feeling good about the plan that we've put forward for our community. And also I'm feeling good about the progress that we've made over the last 11 years in our community with new infrastructure, the investments in healthcare, the investments in education, and job creation initiatives through the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund Corporation. But what I am concerned about is a plan by the Hudak Conservatives to cut 100,000 jobs in Ontario. That will mean job cuts in Sault Ste. Marie, what we cannot afford at this point, and obviously significant impact to services that residents in our community relied on. I'm also concerned about going back to the days when the NDP represented our community and our unemployment rate hit 19%. We saw our youth leaving in masses, and we had very little provincial support in our community. So, we're going to work very hard on this campaign. I'm going to work hard. I've been out for many days to this point, knocking on doors and talking to residents. And the sense I'm getting at the doors is that residents want to see the progress continue. They like the investments that have been made under our government, and they want to continue moving forward.
This budget that your party just came out with, do you think the other two parties were foolish in rejecting it? And if so, why?
I think, we spent many days and months contacting Ontarians across the province, holding pre-budget consultations, really to get a sense of the priorities that Ontarians had. And certainly we held consultations here in the community with the Ontario Finance Minister. And I was very pleased with our budget. The programs that we put forward, greater retirement benefits for those in the province so that seniors can retire with the security and dignity that they deserve, improved investments in home care services in our community, support for personal support workers, early childhood educators, our infrastructure development program of $130 billion over 10 years that would see greater investments in things like four-laning our highway, which is obviously very important to transportation for Northerners, as well as a job creation initiative through the Jobs and Prosperity Plan, which is a $2.5 billion 10-year program. So I was certainly very, very pleased with the budget, and I know that there was considerable support from the experts that are out there in various sectors of Ontario who have provided ringing endorsements of this budget. But I'm quite shocked that the NDP had decided to force the election. The Conservatives, without reading the budget, without seeing the budget before it was even introduced, indicated that they were going to attempt to force an election. I think that's obviously completely irresponsible of a party to, in a minority government situation, not be willing to work together, because at the end of the day, Ontarians sent this makeup to the Ontario legislature, and they expect people to work together, represent their communities, and do that. So we're at the polls. I think many people are surprised in our community that we're having an election, and I'm also hearing at the doors that people are surprised that the NDP forced this election, and some of the rationale that they used behind that seemed a bit bizarre as well.
Maybe it was the right time for them to call an election?
Well, the rationale that I've heard from them is progress on auto insurance and an accountability officer. They said an accountability officer wasn't put in place, but the reality is, in committee, there have been a number of qualified candidates that have been put forward, and the NDP have been blocking the appointment of these individuals, yet claiming that we're having an election because the accountability officer is not in place. They've also been claiming that we're having this election because we haven't made progress on the reduction of automobile insurance rates, when in fact the Financial Commission of Ontario that reviews this has indicated that over the last 8 months, auto insurance rates for the average driver in Ontario have gone down about 6%, and we are on track to fulfill that commitment of reducing them by 15% over the next 2 years. And as you might know, recently the NDP sent mistakenly from their party headquarters to the media in Ontario notes saying that they could not say that the Liberals had broken this promise, and there was progress on this issue. And one of their own candidates campaigning in Halton, an NDP candidate, was on Twitter saying that they had just received their auto insurance premium renewal and their rates had gone down. So, I'm concerned about the reasons that they use to force the election, and I'm also concerned, obviously, that they're compromising very good investments for residents in our city that we need to make so that we can continue moving forward.
I'd like to ask you a question about the pension plan. Where would we get all this money? Because from the Canadian pension plan, which is supposedly almost depleted, how would we manage to finance that?
So the Canada Pension Plan is obviously a federal system, and the provinces have been saying to the federal government that we need to strengthen supports for those retiring in Ontario because people are simply not saving enough. They don't have the resources, they have other costs that they are coping with, and people are not saving enough in retirement. That's a fact right across the country. The federal government has so far resisted any changes or improvements to the Canada Pension Plan. So we recognize this is a need in Ontario, and we're prepared to move forward with an Ontario pension plan similar to the CPP, building on the CPP. It's a small deduction of 1.9% that would go toward an individual's retirement. So when you think of the average Canadian on CPP receiving about $12,500 in benefits, that's hardly enough to live on. And this would see a similar program in Ontario, about $12,500 as well. And so now someone who is retiring in this province would have the security and dignity that they need. I mean, no one in this province should be working for 30 years and retire and live the rest of their life in poverty. So this is an important program, but we want to have a discussion with Ontarians about how best to implement this and that cost structure.
Do you think the business people would be able to afford that cost on top of the CPP cost that they already have?
Well, those are, we've reduced we have some of the lowest corporate taxes and business taxes in North America. We've reduced the business education tax as well. We've harmonized the HST, which allows business inputs, both provincially and federally, as opposed to previously where they were only getting the benefit of one of those taxes being rebated to them or that being used as a credit. So now they're getting the entire portion as well. So we've tried to strengthen and reduce the cost burden to business in a number of ways, which is obviously very important. But that's a conversation that we need to have with the business community and with industry across the province.
What do you feel the major issues are in this coming election?
Well, as someone who began in Sault Ste. Marie in the political environment when I was 28 running for city council, I heard firsthand at the doors families expressing to me concerns about their children moving away, about a lack of jobs and challenges with respect to services, with people without family doctors, and without the new infrastructure that we needed here. We've made a huge amount of progress in this community. We've had many new doctors come to our community. We have a new hospital with radiation therapy services here. We've built, for the first time in decades, 5 new schools in Sault Ste. Marie. But what I continue to hear is the job creation initiative is an important priority, as well as improved healthcare services and home care services for seniors, which is 2 of the key elements that we've focused on in our budget. And we've gone through a major recession in this province, and a global recession at that. We still are not where we need to be, but we certainly don't want to return to the days when the NDP represented this community. We were at 19% unemployment. We hit a record low in 2006, 2007, 6.5% unemployment in this city, which was a 25-year low. We've continued to make very strong investments in this community, but obviously our $295 million youth jobs and training program, which is part of the budget, we want to see working here in Sault Ste. Marie. We've helped 471 young people through the Northern Ontario Heritage program for youth and intern co-op training program. We're supporting our major industries. There is significant concern about SR Steel, Tenaris, Flakeboard, all of our major industries, that they will continue to operate and thrive in Sault Ste. Marie. So we set up a Northern Industrial Energy Rate program that sees the costs of energy reduced for these companies by $41 million cumulatively. And that's helping these businesses lower their cost of production, stay competitive, and keep people working in Sault Ste. Marie. So we don't want to go back to the way it was in Sault Ste. Marie when we had 15,000 people without a doctor, where we had no new hospital, where we had no new schools being built, where we didn't have investments by the province being made. It's a very real concern. And I'm continuing to talk to folks at the doors who are saying to me, we need to continue to move forward. We need to continue to see these investments made in Sault Ste. Marie. And our government has a very, very strong plan to be able to continue to do that.
We've had some polls coming out, and some of them have the Liberals winning by a minority, and some have the Conservatives winning by a minority. If you get elected, how are you going to approach both scenarios?
So obviously, if our government is re-elected, I will obviously be pleased with that. But I'll be pleased with that because the residents of Sault Ste. Marie are going to benefit. They'll benefit from the programs in the budget and the initiatives that we've put forward that we'll be able to continue to build on. I obviously will be very concerned if a Tim Hudak government comes to power at Queen's Park, because there will be significant job losses in our community. There will be significant services cut in our community, which we simply cannot afford. And I will obviously be concerned if an NDP government comes to power at Queen's Park. They, during their time in government, did not balance a single budget ever in Ontario. Unemployment in Sault Ste. Marie ran at 19%. We had no new schools built. We had doctors being reduced, medical school spaces. We had 3,000 nurses let go. We had the social contract imposed on teachers, where wages for teachers were actually cut. That stands in stark contrast to the huge investments we've made in education. 70% more funding for our students here in Sault Ste. Marie, 68% more funding for healthcare services. But specifically, obviously, I will work to try to protect these jobs in our community and build on the gains that we've made. In Sault Ste. Marie and in Northern Ontario, our government has a very strong record of investment and of job creation and supporting the programs and services that we need. And the other parties don't have that kind of record. They have demonstrated in the past, when they've had the opportunity to support our community, they haven't. One small example, we've taken the Northern Ontario Heritage Fund program, a key economic development tool, from $60 million to $100 million. When the NDP was in government, they took $60 million in the Heritage Fund, they put it into general revenues, they basically cut the program for Northerners for an entire year, shortchanging people in the North from job creation opportunities. That's not the kind of responsible government. The other aspect of that is Tim Hudak and Andrea Horvath have also not committed to maintain the Ministry of Northern Development and Mines and the Ministry of Natural Resources. Two ministries that are critical to the lives of Northerners and, quite frankly, provide hundreds of jobs to people here in Sault Ste. Marie that have all kinds of spin-off benefits to businesses and our community. These are our friends, our families, our neighbors, and we can't afford to lose these jobs and see these compromised. So we're going to work very hard to let people know why we're having an election and also what our plan offers for people in Sault Ste. Marie.
If you do end up with a minority Liberal government, how are you going to tweak that budget so that the Conservatives and NDPs will accept it? Because they're definitely going to not accept the same budget that you just put out.
Well, Ontarians may decide that the opposition parties should be more willing to work with our government should we be re-elected as a minority government. The reality is there is very strong investments for Ontarians. But obviously we'll need to work with the opposition parties. That's what we've continued to do. We recognize that. We were sent there in this makeup of the Ontario legislature by Ontarians to work together. This is a costly $100 million election that I have not heard Ontarians clamoring for. They expect us to continue to work together, and we'll do that. And if I'm re-elected, that's my commitment to this community, that I will continue to fight for the interests of this community.
Now, this city has two major problems. One, the water quality, and two, the condition of our streets. Today, CTV reported that there was a water problem throughout Ontario in the major cities. That there was, in some of the cities, there was almost 2,000 parts per million of lead content. Now, if you get elected again, how will you be able to help our city with the road condition and the water quality, specifically in the East End?
So I certainly recall being a councillor and having services that were previously paid for by the province downloaded by a government to us, by a conservative government, with additional costs driving up our taxes, and an NDP representation that didn't do anything about that or wasn't able to. So one of the important things that I think is important to recognize is that we have uploaded significant services previously paid for by municipal taxpayers on their property tax to the provincial level, which is very important. We've made investments of over $36 million in the last 10 years in direct payments to the city to support road renewal infrastructure. We've also created an Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund that provides transfer payments to the City of Sault Ste. Marie. Now, this fund is not available to all communities in Ontario. Many communities in Ontario do not receive any additional funding through transfer payments. Our city receives, and is receiving this year, $17 million, about $501 per household going to the city to help pay for the operation of municipal services. How the city decides on where that money will be spent and what purposes it's put to, that is a decision made by the mayor and our elected members of City Council. With respect to water quality, one of the important things I think to recognize is that we retained the PUC. The PUC Distribution Services, that has responsibility for overseeing these services, is a crown corporation of the City of Sault Ste. Marie. So the reality is that the mayor and council have the ability to discuss with the PUC what kinds of programs, what kinds of services, what kinds of costs will be borne by municipal ratepayers. But I see it certainly as my job provincially to try to lighten the burden for municipal taxpayers, and we've continued to do that. We've provided about $10 million in gas tax funding to the City of Sault Ste. Marie that's paid for new buses and additional staff there. We've also helped to increase Algoma Public Health Unit funding by 50%. We've increased funding for land ambulance. We've paid for, the first time in the history of the province, paid for city police officers at the municipal level, typically paid for solely by the City of Sault Ste. Marie, as well as provided $36 million for road funding and the Ontario Municipal Partnership Grant on top of that. So our government has a very strong record in transferring dollars to the municipality to reduce those pressures. And there is obviously some responsibility that is taken by the mayor and city council to determine how best to deliver these programs and services that we provide the dollars for.
So in layman's terms, you will supply the money. It is up to the city to decide how to spend it.
We'll do everything we can, and I think our record stands in stark contrast to the past records of the other parties in terms of providing dollars to the municipality. And yes, we've continued to do that, and the mayor and council will make the determination on how those services are delivered.
Tell us why you should be re-elected.
So, Mike, I think it's very important for residents in Sault Ste. Marie to recognize the very significant investments that we've made in Sault Ste. Marie. I've worked hard on the behalf of residents in our community to help improve our healthcare services, our education services, and build new infrastructure and help to create jobs here locally in our community. And I, for one, certainly don't want to go back to the days in our community when the NDP represented our city and we hit 19% unemployment. We saw very little provincial investment and our youth were leaving in masses. And we also, I don't think, want to have a time here in our community where we repeat the cuts to our public services that we've seen in the past as well. We've got a great plan, a great budget, a strong program for residents in Sault Ste. Marie, and I think people in our community want to continue the progress. And I certainly want to continue working very hard for the residents of Sault Ste. Marie, as I've done over the last 11 years as a provincial representative.
Thank you very much.